Welcome into the latest edition of the Sick Podcast, whenever you may be listening. I'm John Bogle. We got a couple guys in the wings, getting ready to jump on here with us. Some different stuff to get into. It's All-Star season, so we've been talking about the All-Star prospects and the different things coming up. Got a discussion coming up about Jayden Daniels, so be sure that you stick around for that. But first, Shane back in the studio. As always, let's hit it.
Turn up your volume. Because you're about to listen to The Sick Podcast. With Draft Vogel.
With the first pick in the 2021 NFL Draft. The first pick in the 2022 NFL Draft. With the first pick in the 2023 NFL Draft.
The sickest NFL Draft Show. It's gonna be sick.
And remember that this episode is presented by DraftKings, where the NFL season is still going strong. Hey, if you haven't made money this NFL season, get on top of this. DraftKings Sportsbook is hooking up new customers with an offer that's even stronger. Bet $5 on any game this week to score $200 instantly in bonus bets. And DraftKings isn't stopping there. All customers can take advantage of a sweetener offer every game day this November. Get in on the game day greatness. Download the DraftKings Sportsbook app now and use the code SICKSPORTS. You can see it on the screen if you're listening on wherever you'd like to listen to your podcast, Sick Sports. New customers can score $200 instantly. So let's bring the guys in. Justen Gamble and Mark Jarvis joining us. Mark, we officially extended this invitation. We've been teasing it here a little bit recently, but welcome to the show. Welcome to the show.
And Mark said, yeah, sure, when we asked him. We were all hyped, and he's like, yeah, sure.
Yeah,
so
cool.
We know he's hyped.
Hey, that is hype for Jarvis. Come on, man.
Yeah, right? We're not going to get much more
He's a
out of
computer
I've gotten
whiz
so
over
much
here.
more mild-mannered.
Well, hey, that's what happens when you get older. You start to mellow out, and you go, hey, okay, yeah, sure.
Weed is legalized in Ohio now, so maybe that's what's up.
Yeah, that's got something to do with it, definitely.
Yeah.
I was about to make that joke.
Soon enough. I'll probably slow down talking when we get to that stage of the legalization process.
Yeah.
Your brain will start to work like mine, bro. So it's a slippery slope. Be careful.
So, guys, we want to go ahead and start on this these interesting comments that were made by Dave Tepper with the Carolina Panthers this week, and I'm glad Jarvis brought this up. As we were talking about things that we wanted to get into, because there's a whole lot to get into. I got into a Twitter fight over it. I don't know if y'all saw that. Dave Tepper came out basically after firing Frank Reich, the head coach for the Carolina Panthers, after 11 games. Third coach he's fired midseason since he's bought the team, which was not that long ago. Ron Rivera was fired during the season. I believe that was his first year as the owner. He fired Ron, and then followed it up with 3 years later firing Matt Rule during the season. That was last year. Now he's fired Frank Reich. And so this is kind of a trend that we started to see as well, is first-year head coaches, when it's not going good, you don't have that time. Granted, there have been some absolute disasters in the last couple of years. Urban Meyer with the Jaguars was a train wreck. Everybody saw that one coming. Last year with the Denver Broncos, Nate Hackett gets fired 13 games into the season. So there was definitely some, this is something that's starting to kind of trend in that pattern. So, Mark, I want to start out, this is your idea, so I want to start you out with your thoughts on this situation.
Well, I'm curious what you said you got in a Twitter fight over it. I'm curious what the argument coming back your way was.
I'm going to make sure that I get this. I'm going to make sure I get this stuff up. It wasn't anybody significant. It was just more of me putting out information and somebody not realizing that I was trying to let them know about stuff without saying I know people. If that makes sense.
Fair.
It never works on Twitter.
My thing, I saw he said it was unanimous, and the first thing I did was start looking at how many people were in that building, right? How many people have a hand in that pot as far as the decision. If you're going with a really, wide open estimate, you're probably looking at 20 people in that front office who might have watched those quarterbacks and had an opinion on them. The coaches, you're looking at maybe 5 to 10. So in total, you've got 25 to 30 people that have looked at these two quarterbacks and I mean, you guys saw the consensus at that point. It wasn't full all 100% Bryce. It was pretty split. There was a lot of people who like Stroud a little bit more. And so when you say, yeah, we were unanimous, all of our coaches, all of our scouts, what that tells me is that the odds of you being unanimous are they're not friendly, right? Like, it's like if you were to take everyone out for ice cream and go, oh yeah, let's go get ice cream, and every one of them orders vanilla. Like, what are the odds you're gonna get that? So immediately I had so many red flags going up in regards to that statement. Just there's no way everyone in that building came in and like, oh yeah, Bryce Young, QB1. Yeah, we all agree. Sure. Cool.
I mean, it's probably like a jury. Like, at the end of the day, maybe he got everyone to be like, fine, we'll take Bryce. But it took time. It took convincing. And there was probably that process where it's like, none of us agree, or we all have different opinions, but we're going to, get to the same spot reluctantly. But it's not like anyone, like you said, there's no way everyone just came in with that opinion. He might have gotten everyone to, at the end, to be fine with it. But if that's unanimous, like that's a stretch on the word unanimous. That's not how that works. You know what I mean? So I think when Mark put that tweet out about when he said like their whole family, the ice cream thing, I'm like, yeah, that's perfect, because there's no way he had a gun to all their heads and said vanilla, but it wasn't like they all came in with that opinion to start. So that's just like horrible phrasing on his part and a horrible way to explain it too.
Yeah, so I'm getting that video. Let's go ahead and pull it up. Shane, Dave Tepper explaining this. Oh, do we have sound on it? We may not have sound. So basically what he said is, that, yeah, like you guys, just in case no one realized. He said that it was unanimous in the building that everybody wanted Bryce Young. That's what he said. And I think, like you mentioned, that definitely didn't happen. For a fact, I can state this for a fact: the coaching staff wanted C.J. Stroud. Yeah. In the comments that he made in that video specifically are already bad enough, because he goes on and explains that, well, there was the reports before the draft about how we were gonna, Chicago's gonna trade to Houston to 2, and we were essentially going to pull a 3-way trade where we were going to trade to 2 to take C.J. Stroud because we thought the Texans were going to take Bryce Young. And then ultimately, they decide the Texans back out of the deal. They trade up to 1 to get their quarterback. So he confirms that rumor and then turns around and says, yeah, we were 100% unanimous on Bryce Young. That was my first problem with what was being said. The second thing was the coaches all wanted C.J. Stroud. If you look at, I think I said this back when this happened, when this pick was made. I may have actually been on the Sick podcast talking about it, one of the shows. And it made no sense. You've got Frank Reich coming in here, who's a 6'5" pocket passer quarterback that had done that for a long time in the league, led one of the greatest comeback ever in NFL history against the Oilers in the playoffs. As a backup quarterback, he had to come in that game and pull that off. And then since he's been a coach in the league, he's done nothing but work with 6'5" pocket passer quarterbacks. You hired Thomas Brown from the Rams to be the offensive coordinator. He was the quarterbacks coach out there who has done nothing at the Rams except work with 6'5" pocket passer quarterbacks, Jared Goff, Matthew Stafford. And then for your quarterbacks coach, you hired Josh McCown, who was an 18-year, 6'5" pocket passer quarterback. And you want me to believe that you wanted the 5'10" improviser.
Yeah.
Where does that make any sense whatsoever?
Yeah.
Now, the coaches all wanted C.J. Stroud. I think that they made the initial move thinking they were going to take Stroud. But as things went along, Tepper steps in and goes, no, we need Bryce Young. And look at how it messed up the scheme. Look at what they're running in Carolina. It is for a pocket passer to thrive. Yeah, it's vanilla. Yeah, it's a lot of stuff, but it's sitting in the pocket looking at where you're going to make the read. Everything that Bryce Young does well, which is, hey, stretch the field, give me different layers, give me things all over the place, run a lot of bootleg type concepts, get me outside the pocket, and let me improvise. Let me make things happen with my legs. They're not doing that in Carolina at all because they never were going to. They never had the staff for it. They don't have guys that have done that before. They got guys that have all worked with pocket passers. Granted, C.J. Stroud, not a 6'5" pocket passer. I think he was 6'2", just a shy under 6'3", if I'm not mistaken. But still, in that stereotype,
The
a
mold,
much
though.
better fit. He plays up to 6'5". He looks 6'5" when he's playing quarterback. Okay, so I would have made fun of the pick regardless because I wasn't a huge Stroud guy. I thought that Stroud wasn't aggressive, but I was looking at this going, this makes no sense because you brought in a whole staff to coach CJ Stroud, and you're going with Bryce Young. That makes no sense.
I think another issue, real quick, that I have with Tepper's outlook and his actions by firing Reich is it doesn't matter if they did draft CJ Stroud. That roster is a dumpster fire. Your 6th overall rookie tackle has been awful. Your receivers are the worst unit in the league. Your 2nd-round receiver you drafted, incompetent. Jonathan Mingo has been unusually bad. Everything about them is bad. Miles Sanders is underwhelming. They just don't have any ability to do probably anything they wanted to do. So it's like, yeah, you got to give Frank Reich a year with these guys, regardless of if you drafted the guy that doesn't fit or the guy that does fit. Probably wasn't going to be good. So don't fire him. Get him another year and get him some weapons, get him some help, see if it works. Because we've seen Reich. He's not incompetent as a coach and a play caller. He just doesn't have any. This Panthers team sucks, regardless of who is at quarterback. I mean, if Josh Allen was on this team, we'd be saying the same thing. Like, who's he throwing to? These guys are rubbish. You can only make so much happen as a quarterback, but it's such a dependent position on everything around you. So firing Reich, like, who are you going to bring in that's going to solve this? Nobody. The quarterback is doesn't fit the personnel. The personnel doesn't fit the NFL. I just can't figure out what Tepper thinks is like the big picture now, because all you've really done is set yourself back, and now you don't have a coach. Like, it's just dumpster fire. And I hope Bryce's career isn't ruined because of it or put on like a big hiatus, but it just doesn't look good right now. Nothing about it looks good.
And how much that comes back to Scott Fitterer too, the general manager. You know, the one guy that Bryce has been able to lean on all year has been Adam Thielen, who is in the back end of his career. Had a great time in Minnesota. I mean, he's been putting up some great numbers, but it's because he's the only guy that seems to be getting open. You know,
Yeah.
So how much of that comes back to Fitterer too, and why does he still have a job if you're going to fire the coach and you're going to fire the running backs coach Deuce Staley and you're going to fire the quarterbacks coach Josh McCown? You know what I'm saying?
Which also doesn't make any sense.
There goes your NFL playing experience now too.
Yeah.
Thomas Brown didn't play in the league.
Yeah. So I'm saying it's a dumpster fire. Like, everything about this team, I'm like, just send them into oblivion. Like, they shouldn't be in the NFL right now. This is a college team that needs to reset.
Can we go ahead
It's
and send them down and bring up the DC defenders? Is that something that we're allowed to do? Like,
I'll write in to Goodell. I'll see what I can do. See what I can do. While we're at it, let's bring up modern day from high school and send down Iowa to high school, because I can't. We have too many mismatched teams right now, bro.
Iowa competing for a Big Ten championship, and you're talking about sending them down to high school.
Averages 3 points a game competing for a championship.
Hey, defense wins championships, baby.
Confusing, man. Oh, Jesus.
But Mark, you know, that was the thing that bugged me the most out of firing the coach. You know, was not just firing him, but firing all the NFL experience that you have pretty much. I think there's one or two guys still that have some left, but it's not even like you can say, oh, well, we're going to a more players-based approach like Detroit has taken, like some other teams have taken in the league. You brought these guys in. You brought this entire staff in. You let them go 11 games with terrible personnel, and now you just start firing people left and right. When you are a coach and you're being interviewed, you're going through the interview process. We're going to have several openings this year. Who in their right mind is going to go to Carolina right now?
Gosh, I don't even know. Here's what is tricky to me, right? From Tepper's standpoint, is can he come out and say after the fact, hey, we were really split on Stroud and Young as prospects, right? Like, can you say, hey, yeah, it was like a 60-40 split in our team. You know, we ended up selecting Bryce, but we had a lot of people in a room like Stroud. Can you say that? You can't really do that, right? So I think he was trying to kind of foster just this attitude of like, we made the decision, it falls at my feet, and we're behind it. But I think just the way he expressed it just really did not live up to expectations, because we know just intuitively it was not 25 to 30 people in this building going, yeah, we all want Young. Every one of us watched him. Every one of us before the fact, said, yeah, we want him, no doubt. Never a question. I don't know. It worries me as far as the dynamics of how they make decisions in that building. Just as far as like, it's okay to have the difference of opinion between some of our team likes Stroud, some of our team like the Young, and then surface that and discuss it rather than it being this. Oh yeah, we were all unanimous the whole way. Absolutely. Maybe you have to do that for the public face, but
yeah,
I
Jerry
get
Jones
I get that side of it too, but it's just like the entire press conference, and I think Angry Scout said something about this on Twitter right after it too. It was damage control, is what it was. Yeah. There at that point, why even hold a press conference? If you're just going to go in there and say all the stereotypical things and yep, we agree, we all were on the same page, blah blah blah. When everybody in the league knows for a fact that's not what was going on, and it just, I guess that's the public face of the NFL that bothers me on this personnel side.
I think Mark's right though. He's got to do damage control now and like put that statement out for the public, because he has to still hire somebody and have someone accept that job. So if he comes out and is like, we were split, but I made the decision, that it shows how bad the dynamic is in that building. So he's got to make it seem like it's not that bad of a job. Like,
we already know.
I know.
Knows. It's like, don't hold the press conference.
I know.
Don't make it worse.
Yeah, don't double down. Now we know you're a liar and stupid.
And he could have angled it too. Like, we made the decision after going through all this as our organization to decide we're going to take Young, and we still stand behind it. We believe in Bryce, so on and so forth. And he didn't do that. I think that's the part that confuses me the most, because it's just GM speak, right? Or owner speak, is to say, yeah, we made this decision, we stand behind it. We're going to see how things play out, but we still believe in them, so on and so forth. And I think most owners, most GMs, anyone in a position of leadership understands that dynamic, and they understand how they have to approach it. And so to go kind of the opposite direction discussing that, I don't think anyone in the league that hears that goes, yeah, they were not split. Like, yeah, they were unanimous. No one who understands any, group decision making to any degree and is going to believe that, oh yeah, it was, everyone agreed across the board. No doubt. It was just all in on it, Yeah.
So Tepper's a liar is what we're saying.
Yeah, straight down to the core, all the way, baby. No, so to kind of segue this and go with decision making and group discussions and different things, you have this thesis that's been prepared for Justin regarding Jayden Daniels, and so you go ahead and start that. While you're doing that, I'm gonna go grab my coffee and I'm going to throw some creamer in it, and I'm going to sit down. So go ahead, buddy. Get this thing started.
So, Mark, give him the backstory, Mark, about the bet that, or the stupid answer that I had to your question, though.
Okay. So I said, I put out on Twitter, and I said, what's a fair percentage chance for Jayden Daniels to be the first quarterback off the board? So that got a lot of fella. Well, it got a lot of different answers, right? Like, some people are like, 25%. You're like, that guy's probably an LSU fan. Or it got 0%. It's like, okay, cool. You really don't think the odds are high. And so I also put out a poll on it trying to figure out, what do people think? Is it, what's the right price on this essentially? Right. But Justin responded to it and he said, genuinely think it's 0.
Yeah.
And so I think that's it's an interesting viewpoint. Man, I'm trying to say this nicely. I don't want to be mean to you.
I got thick skin, buddy. I know I think I and the listeners know you're smarter than me. So
two-time two-time shower on what is it? Old Takes Exposed, right?
So right. Here's one way to put it, Justin, is if your answer is just simply 0, here's the question I would ask you. Right. I'm going to assume you have it. May and Williams are above Daniels, and Daniels is QB3, right? Yeah. What are the odds that May or Williams has a significant injury before the draft, like during the pre-draft process?
So that's what I wanted. That's why I was excited to have this podcast today, because I'm like, all right, a bar. If there's an injury or something, then shoot, I guess SOL, because that is what I think could happen. That's the only thing I think could happen is one of them gets hurt, or one of them has like, God forbid they do, and I hope they don't, like some off the field incident, something that we're like, oh, well, now you can't draft him, or So I guess I should have put that into my bet with you, but as far, like I would just say is if everything holds as is, Dre and Williams both declare, they both stay healthy. It's not even like I'm like, oh, Jayden Daniels is nowhere near there, but like he is not the type of prospect like with his rushing ability and his arm and his height. Like there's legitimate reasons why I could see him going first overall or above them. Like I get it. I just think, and I don't think he could jump Williams and May at this point. I genuinely don't. And that's why I was willing to bet you $100 on it. But I do like, I just wanted to put out there, I do like Daniels as a prospect a lot. It's just not in this class. Do I think he'll go above those two? So I could look silly at some point. But
the bet, to be clear, was $1 to win 100. So it's essentially a 1% chance betting that it's, you think it's lower than that. I think it's higher than that. So where my mind went with it is, how long did it take you to feel comfortable with that bet when you were taking that bet? Like, what were you thinking?
Well, the funny thing is, like 2 weeks before you tweeted that, I was in a group chat with the guys from my old podcast we've had a group chat for like 7 years, and we were talking about Jayden, and we were like, damn, like this kid's dynamic as hell. We've all, a few of us watched some of the all 22s of his games of Florida State, Bama, I forget which other one. And we were like, well, his game is still maturing from the pocket, but good Lord, like the tools are insane. And the ability he has just straight up on the field is crazy. But we kind of, we're like, let's not get ahead of ourselves. When you watch Drake May and Caleb Williams, there's an obvious difference in the way they handle themselves from the pocket and the command they have as passers. And especially because they've had, 2 years each, or 3 for Caleb, where you're like, okay, elite prospects, like out of this world prospects. These guys do so much well. They don't lack anything either. They're both dynamic runners. They're both dynamic with their arms. They're both big guys. It's just there's too much going against him. So, I mean, that's why it's kind of like that bet. I didn't have to think about it right on the spot. I was like, I've had this talk a few times already. And I think Jayden made himself a lot of money this year by transferring. But I think it's, not enough just based off who he's going against, and that's unfortunate for him. But I think he's still going to go in the top 15. I think he's really rising. He's ascending. So we'll see. But
and part of what kind of caught my eye with it too is I posed the question of like, if you were a sports book and you've got money to play with, would you let me bet 1 to win $1 million or 1 to win 100,000, right? And you're just like, yeah, I'd give you all of those. And the gap between a 1%, a 0.1%, a 0.001%, so on and so forth. I think it's kind of like you got out of this mindset of like, what's the actual like fair odds number into just, is it going to happen? Yes or no? Right.
Right.
Intuitively, when you hear Jayden Daniels first quarterback off the board, an answer pops to your mind. No,
you're like, no way. Yeah.
And so that's one of the things I wanted to bring up was this idea that we're not intuitively really good probability estimators. We kind of just have the answer comes to our mind, and it either makes sense, it's coherent, and we believe that, okay, yeah, sure, or it's not. You're not sitting there running calculations necessarily. So I wanted to share a couple of quotes on that, and one is from, I know I talked to you, I think, about this, John, this book called Super Forecasting. Gamba, I've showed you a couple things on Twitter about this, right? So if you don't mind, I'll read the quote. And I would just add too, we've evolved for passing on our genes, right? Not making these complex predictions and trying to figure out numbers wise what the odds of any, weird outcome is. Human beings have coped with uncertainty for as long as we have recognizably been human. And for almost all that time, we didn't have access to statistical models of uncertainty because they didn't exist. It was remarkably late in our history before the best minds started to think seriously about probability. Before that, people had no choice but to rely on the tip of your nose perspective. You see a shadow moving in the long grass. Should you worry about lions? You try to think of an example of a lion attacking from the long grass. If the example comes to your mind easily, run. If the response is strong enough, it can produce a binary conclusion. Yes, it's a lion, or no, it's not a lion. But if it's weaker, it can produce an unsettling middle possibility. Maybe it's a lion. What the tip of your nose perspective will not deliver is a judgment so fine-grained that it can distinguish between, say, a 60% chance that it is a lion and an 80% chance. That takes slow, conscious, careful thought. Of course, when you were dealing with the pressing existential problems of our ancestors, it was rarely necessary to make such fine distinctions. The ability to distinguish between a 60% probability and 80% probability would add little. In fact, a more fine-grained analysis could slow you down and get you killed. In this light, the preference for 2 or 3 setting mental dials makes sense. And so when we think about it that way, right, an answer comes intuitively to your mind. It makes sense. Hey, Jayden Daniels right now is not as good of a quarterback as Drake May or Caleb Williams, in your opinion. And so you're not thinking, what if Drake has this injury in his bowl game or something if he decides to play? What if Caleb has this off-field stuff that kind of balloons and drops him? And then it's one-on-one, right? Jayden versus one or the other.
Right.
And that gets more complex, So you're not viewing it as this large decision tree of possibilities. You're viewing it very much like cool, And I think that's what got me was the aspect of when you make that bet, it's okay. Is it 1%? Is it 0.1? So on and so forth.
Should it have been like 25? Yeah.
I don't know if I'd go 25, and that's an interesting point too, because I'll just go ahead and say it. I said it on Twitter already. I personally would have Daniels over Mayor Williams right now, and so does that mean I think he's more likely to go earlier than them? Not necessarily. Right. I think more teams still will like May, but I think trying to step out of that mindset of what did I see on tape, and what is my intuitive okay, well Daniels QB1 yes or no, and step out of that into okay, what do I think the real odds are across the league, if that makes sense.
Right. And that's what the draft is as a whole. It's just like an auction, and teams are trying to figure out where do I need to take him? Who will go here? Who will go here? They might have this guy above this guy, but do they really need to take him there? Or there's the probability that he'll fall to this other spot. We can get him, better. So, I love the whole quote, the whole thing. That's, I don't really think that way too much, but I need to.
Well, and the other thing too, that I want to add specifically about this specific Daniels deal is I think the odds of him becoming a higher pick, than anybody's talking about right now is really good, because look at how Lamar Jackson is playing in Baltimore right now. Look at what they built for him. He just got through his 12th game. He'll be playing his 13th game for the first time in the last 2 seasons. He's missed, he gets knocked out at week 12, at the 12th game, the last 2 years. He just got through that. And the whole idea of Todd Monken in Baltimore building that system the way that he did was, one, to get Lamar to be in the pocket a little bit more than he's been in the past, and 2, to protect him and to keep him healthy for the season. And so by the last 2 seasons standard, he's surpassing that right now. Okay, so knock on wood, he won't go down week 13. But when you look at the way that he's playing, and then you look at Jayden Daniels at LSU, and you look at those 2 guys and you put them next to each other, what is the main difference right now between Jayden Daniels and Lamar Jackson?
Who are you asking?
Either one of you.
I think Lamar is a more dynamic runner overall. I think the way he works in a phone booth and makes people miss is different, where I think Jayden is more straight line, but he's so slippery and kind of slithery. Even his body type, you look at him and you're like, that dude could fit through a crack in the door. But I don't think it takes away from how dynamic he really is. I think there's differences though as rushers. And I think, you have a good point, because there's not a lot. There's not a ton, other than we know Lamar can work in the NFL, obviously, because he is. Jayden's still not. So it's you have to make that projection and hope that it works out the same. But yeah, as current players, you're if that's what we can hope for him to be, or something close, definitely worth a first round pick. And that's why I do think he'll go top 15 when it's all said and done.
I think that when you look at the growth that he's had over the last few years of his career, that's the biggest thing I'm always looking for in a quarterback. Outside of what, when we had Coach George on here and he talked about platform and all those different things and those little nuanced things. To me, overall, what I like to see out of a quarterback is that consistent growth. Okay, just getting better, and it's marked. And with Jayden Daniels, it's marked over his career. Yep. He comes out every year a better player, and he gets better by the game. We start to see more. We didn't realize he was this crazy runner until the end of the year, I think. I think we knew that he was a very, very good runner. But then when he went out there and started torching people, it was holy cow. We also didn't realize that he could hit the touch ball the way he can. Like he's been doing all year. That was something that was added to his arsenal this year. So to me, when I look at Drake May, I haven't seen marked growth from Drake May like I have Jayden Daniels. May is an elite prospect, and he's been really since he got into college. He's still not, we haven't seen a pickup in his processing. It's about the same. He's still going to make those boneheaded decisions. He's still going to try to force it into places. You know, Caleb.
He also does not have a Brian Thomas Jr. and a Neighbors who are adding outrageous.
Also fair. But, you know, Devontae Walker came in.
And he's had some horrible drops in key moments. Like, I would just say, I get what you're saying, but UNC and LSU are not the same, especially this year. Like, this year, we're like, all right, LSU might have 2 first-rounders who are – one of them is a world beater. He is an elite prospect. And they're making things quite – like, you know, you watch the all-22 of these two teams, I'm like, gee, Drake May has it rough. Sometimes this game is terrible. Like, these games are rough.
And I hear you, but remember what go back to what Phil, why can't I think of his name right? Sims. What Sims always says all the time. I'm going through like all his brothers and his dad. What does Sims say all the time? Watch where the ball goes.
Right.
When I see Jayden Daniels throw the ball, that ball goes to the right place.
Right.
That's what I see. When I see Drake May throw it, yeah, it's pretty accurate. But if I had to compare his accuracy to, you know, like a guy and put it on in a comparison, I'd say it's like Carson Wentz, where it's gonna get there. It's gonna get there, but it's kind of box accurate. It's kind of all over the place. You know, it's in a catchable place, but it's not like I don't think Drake May's got absolute command of his ball.
Interesting. I think we'll end up disagreeing there throughout the process too, because I think that'll be a part where we're like, But I like that this class has basically, you could argue 3 elite prospects, and there's different things about each of their game that now, obviously analysts and scouts and evaluators are all going to be like, it's not going to be consensus, which is kind of cool. Like, obviously, and I think a lot of people have dropped on Caleb Williams, and I mean, that's fair. I just think some people see it differently, and that's another interesting perspective is like, all right, 3-4 years from now, who was right? You know, like who had it right? Because personally, I think we've talked about this. I'm like, Caleb has been bored since the middle last year. He's been better than everyone for so long that there's only so much he can do, and he's not an idiot. He knows that, and I think he's just been YOLOing out there and he wants to win or just play football his way, and if he loses, he's like, okay, but I'm not going to go out there and sell out and do things a certain way that I know we're not going to win doing.
I have to argue because, I mean, when you see him after that Washington game, he was pretty tore up.
I think he's tore up because he's like, man, what could have been? You know, like, I know I'm better than everyone, but what could have been? And, you know, this team sucks, and my college career didn't probably go the way I wanted it to go. Again, I could be wrong. I'm just like, that's how I see it because I've seen him do, you know, otherworldly things. And I'm like, if you put him on a team with ball winners as receivers, this team's a lot different. Same with May. I'm like, he has Tez Walker who came in late. And even Tez Walker is not an above the rim guy. He's not an adjustment catch guy. He's a deep threat. And even then we've seen him drop deep balls. And I'm like, dude, that's your thing. So these two guys are getting that knock where it's like, it's almost like the Josh Allen thing. And you're like, what's the threshold for how bad a receiver can be? And we can still blame the quarterback. Like at what point are we like this? No one separates. No one's good. And then you go to LSU and I'm like, okay, yeah, Jayden Daniels is also very good. But look at like you'll pause all 22 and I'm like, Brian Thomas and Malik Neighbors are either not covered and he'll still throw it and they make a catch, or they're uncovered because Malik Neighbors is the fastest kid alive most games, and Brian Thomas is 6'4". And so many of these balls that, especially like these touch balls that Jayden's completing to Neighbors, especially, I'm like, if he drops it, what's the narrative there? Then those yards go down. But Malik Neighbors is winning these battles. Brian Thomas is winning these battles. He's taking slants 70 yards to the house, and now look at Jayden's stats. I get how, you know, there's two sides to it, but it just feels like, yeah, put Drake May or Caleb Williams on LSU, and I don't think you're going to see a drop off at all. I think the passing game stays the same, probably gets better. Obviously, they're not the same runners Jayden is, and never will be because he's so dynamic. But I just think it's that thing where swap the quarterbacks, and what does it look like then? You know what I mean?
See, and I get the point too. I'm not even arguing from a yardage standpoint. or in the stats. Right. I don't look at stats very much. Right. I'll look at them every once in a while and go like with Jayden here going, how many yards and how many did he throw and run for in this game? Like, holy cow, like it feels like he's put up 700. But, to me, the one place that Drake is bad right now, and he's not good, is in the intermediate. That's where you really see his ball go all over the place, in that 10 to 20-yard range downfield, on those in cuts, on, hitches, deep curls, different things like that. His ball is all over the place. That concerns me a little bit. Yeah, Drake's a really good deep ball thrower. You got to be able to hit that intermediate area, and that's what's starting to really concern me about him. I haven't seen his processing improve in the intermediate area, and I haven't seen the accuracy get any better. It's still all over the place.
He is in a new system. To that area. He is in a new system this year, I'll say. And it's not an excuse, but it's like this is the first year in this system. So obviously it's like I wouldn't expect him to look like he's mastered a lot of these concepts, especially against defenses he hasn't seen. You know what I mean? So I'm not trying to make the excuse, but I'm like, when I'm watching his film, sometimes I'm like, it's a new system, and you can tell like he was late on that, and I'm like, why was he late on that? I'm like, well, he's probably seen it. This might be the first time, like he's seen that look against that concept. So I'm like, oh, okay, I get the concerns. I understand your concerns 100%, and I think that maybe he's indecisive, and that's why some of his balls are not where they should be, or he's late, or he's just again not looking at the right looks, and that's on him in the end, but. I think there's some things going against him, and who knows if that's, something that's we're gonna look back in a few years and be like, it was all over tape, or it's like, yeah, he finally knows this system and he's kind of mastering it, and we see this guy really take off. But
that's Max Johnson's problem now. He just committed to North Carolina today.
Yeah. which basically announces to us that Drake is gone. He hasn't officially declared, but Drake is gone.
Yeah,
Drake is gone.
Which is a given.
And also Spencer Rattler declared today. Just news. Spencer Rattler's out. So,
yeah, we talked about him last week because he'd accepted Senior Bowl invites, so we knew he was going. Actually, 2 invites have come out since we started recording this thing. As of Wednesday night, the 29th. Leggett officially accepted, and I just saw it just came through that Brandon Rice from USC just accepted as well.
Okay.
Jerry Rice's son.
Yep.
Is that a guy that have you looked at? I know that we talked about Leggett last week, Jarvis, but is Rice somebody that you guys have looked at yet?
Yeah.
I haven't seen him yet. Based on what I saw from the USC receivers while I was watching Caleb, I wouldn't be hoping too much on that one, but like I said, I wasn't paying particularly close attention to him.
It's hard because you're like, oh, that's Jerry's son, and you feel like he's going to get the name boost, but then you watch him, and I'm like, I don't know if he's draftable. And that's the hard thing is you go into watching USC tape, and you're like, all right, this kid, Jerry Rice's son, USC, they get big recruits, they get good players, and then you turn it on, and it's very confusing why he. Well, it's not confusing actually. It makes sense why you don't hear that name more, or like why Jerry Rice's son doesn't get more pub, and it's because he's very underwhelming, extremely underwhelming.
So I'll tell you what I thought. And straight off my notes here, he's a fluid athlete and he moves pretty well. He doesn't have elite end speed, which that's how Jerry was too. Jerry was just like that, where he was just really fluid and didn't have top end speed. Doesn't have a lot of moves in his arsenal. I thought he has pretty good explosive ability. He shows good work through some timing concepts, stop and go type stuff. High points the ball very well as a catcher, but he does struggle with some concentration drops.
Yeah.
He made some really awesome catches through contact. It just commands the catch point. Does a good job of that. And he is capable as a deep threat, but he just doesn't track the ball downfield as well as he should. That's not like his dad. Run after catch, pretty limited. So
where he catches it is where he's down is what I've kind of noticed.
Yeah, they're saying he's going to be just under 6'3", 205.
Yep.
So he's going to I think he's going to be one of these, if you're going to use him, you're going to use him as your 2. He's going to be a lower end 2. Yeah. Or he'll be, a big slot, basically. That's what he'll be. You put him in the slot, and he's probably going to be all right. You give him opportunities where he can kind of get down the field and put him in those situations where he can control the catch point, use his body to shield it, all those good things. I think that he's going to do well with that. He's not going to win with speed, and he doesn't really have a lot of shake to him, if that makes sense, when he's trying to create separation. So that's the concerning thing. And then without having real run after the catch ability, he's just going to put his head down, get north south, and get what he can and go down. It's really hard to project him at this point. You got to see all the testing.
I kind of thought he was barely draftable when I watched, and I'm like, well, let's see what he tests. He might test good, and then it's like, all right, he'll get that boost. He might be a 5th-round pick. But I think the testing is like, he's fringe draftable. He's 6th, 7th round, maybe undraftable. But I think that testing is either going to completely make him undraftable or 5th, 6th round, But I don't think we're talking about
because if he comes out and runs a 4.55, if he runs a 4.55,
yeah,
we're kind of talking about he's right there. That's about what I've been expecting him to run, is a 4.55. But if he comes out and he runs a 4.49, now we're kind of going, maybe he's a little bit faster than we thought, maybe. But again, it's so hard to look at these USC guys because of that scheme. We've been hammering on this the entire year. That scheme is awful.
Yeah.
It's awful.
Yeah.
And trying to evaluate a guy off of it, it's like, how did I do this when I was looking at, CD Lamb and other people that played in it? Like, how did I do this? Like,
it limits their route tree so much.
Learned a lot since then, I guess.
Yeah. No, it just limits their route tree, and you're just like, you watch and you're like, can they run anything but like, I remember, was it Amon-Ra St. Brown? Was he there when Lincoln? No.
USC? No. He was there
Graham
before
Harrell
then.
still. I'm trying to think who I watched. Was it Brew?
Yeah, you got to think Oklahoma guys.
I know. I just remember why.
That's why I went straight to CD, because CD was. I liked CD, but I think I wasn't sure how he was going to do and didn't know how to articulate it.
Yeah.
Back then. And now it's more of a, I just was unsure because I didn't see I couldn't get a full scouting report on him based on the scheme.
Well, even Addison last year, Jordan Addison ran like 2.5 routes for that team, and he was in one spot a lot. It was just, it's hard to get like a real feel on what they're able to do in their route tree.
Yeah, but most of my eval on him was done at Pitt, so I was okay.
Saying, and that was even harder though. He goes from Pitt to USC, and you're like, is this the same guy, or is it just like, does this system just suck? And I'm not really getting to see him run a lot of different routes versus different looks. I don't even get, and same with like, it's like Jackson Smith and Jigba. You're like, they ask him to do one thing most of the game. So like, can he do more, or does he not? A lot of these college offenses just kind of limit what you're able to see, which really sucks. And that's why, like, you right now with the quarterbacks, we're doing so much projecting with these top 3. Like, hopefully May can do more when he's in a system that he's been in for more than a year and has some weapons. Hopefully some of his things sharpen up, his decision making gets better. Hopefully Caleb decides to put in structure and care more, like, or whatever. I don't know. He has so many random things weird about his game. Hopefully Jayden is able to get to a system that really lets him operate with what he does well. I think he's really good in the quick game. I think his timing is nice when it's all there, when like the picture stays the same early. I think he throws a great deep ball, but I think there's like that intermediate part of his game, which is the toughest for everybody. That's where I still see him like, ooh, he makes up for those times when he doesn't see the field well. He just takes off, and props to him. He's amazing at it. But this class has really started to get pretty cool. The more we talked about it, John, like a month or two ago, and we were like, there's like 20 prospects we like, and after that it just gets crappy. But I think the last few weeks, the more football we've seen, I don't know about you or both you guys, but I've started to see a lot more guys that I really like. So that's cool.
I always saw a lot of guys that were in that. I thought it was a deep second, third round group, right? Okay. Especially at wide receiver when you get into the receivers, because I think we were talking about it last week, where when you go down the list, and I just went down my list of Z's, like 2s. It's crazy deep. Like Torrey Horton in a normal class is probably a 3rd, 4th round pick out of Colorado State.
Yeah.
And in this class, it's like, well, does he get a Senior Bowl invite? Like, does he?
I know.
Is there enough there? Is he gonna get out of day like the 5th round? Like, is he picked before then? Because there's so many other guys I can pick from And again, we got to see who goes back, how it all shakes out. I mean, this transfer portal is about to get insane. I'm tracking 300 guys already in there, and we haven't even got to the main brunt of it yet. It's just the graduate seniors.
Yeah,
so,
no,
like,
you're on top of that. So we'll be
oh
talking.
man, oh man, it's crazy right now. So.
Yeah.
And it's about to get nuttier, especially with some of the stuff I'm hearing, about players going here, players going there, and already decisions kind of being made under the table. Like,
well, Riley Leonard's transferring, Tyler Van Dyke, Cam Ward. I mean, we're going to see a little quarterback carousel.
I don't think Ward's made the decision yet.
I thought he announced like 2 days ago he's transferring. He
hasn't.
Cam Ward?
No, he hasn't yet. So it came out that 10 schools have offered him 7 digits to transfer.
You're right. That's what it is.
But he hasn't actually done it yet. So you can scratch Cam Ward off of your draft projections right now. He's not
misinformation, people. Yep.
He's not coming out in the draft this year. Okay.
Yep.
He's transferring, and he's going to be at a Power 5 school. Well, it's not even Power 5 anymore. It's like Power 4, and he's going to absolutely probably kill it next year wherever he ends up.
Go to LSU and take over for Jayden.
That would be smart. I don't
cool.
think that's where he's going to go.
I don't either.
I think he's going Big Ten.
Okay.
Just telling you.
Iowa.
I think he's going Big Ten. They got Cade McNamara staying, I'm pretty sure, so they're happy with it.
Oh, are they? Okay.
Oh, they are. They are, believe it or not.
Man, that's
but yeah, like Will Howard's in there right now, and that's a guy. That's a guy that looks like a prospect, and there's a bunch of Grayson McCall just jumped in. Matt Sluka out of Holy Cross. That's a guy you guys are gonna know about next year, if you don't already.
I don't already. So,
Jarvis, you know about Sluka?
I've heard about him. I haven't seen him at all in depth.
Yeah, he's legit.
I heard he's a pretty freaky athlete for a quarterback.
He is.
Nice.
He is.
Nice.
He's fun. He's a lot of fun. Holy Cross is really good because of him. This is an underrated name. That he'll be draft eligible next year. He's out of Vanderbilt. AJ Swan, he's legit.
Okay.
EJ Warner, Kurt's son, is in the transfer portal. He just entered today out of Temple. It's the quarterbacks. I think right now there's more quarterbacks in the portal than anybody else.
That sounds right. Speaking of quarterbacks, I had a question I wanted to ask you too, especially now that we got Jarvis.
Okay.
And it was after the little segue here. It was after Dorsey got fired, and now Reich is fired. And we were talking about, or who was I talking to about? Oh, well, it's also stemmed from watching Fields on Monday night and watching people tear down Getsy and Eberflus, and like fairly so, they're not doing a great job. But anyway, I had this confusing thought in my head, and it was, well, here's what I wrote down. How much should an offensive coordinator / play caller stray from their own stuff, which is what got them there and got them that job? How much should they stray from that and completely change what they know and what they do just to fit a quarterback? Especially in like Fields' case, when it's such a bad quarterback. How much can you ask a play caller or an offensive coordinator to really like remove themselves from what they want to do and what they were hired to do just because they got a guy that can't do it? I remember Russell Wilson getting Darrell Bevel fired, getting who was after him? Someone else got let go of, I believe, in Seattle. I forget. Anyway, but Russell back then was this, it worked for him, but he's always been the same guy. Can't throw over the middle of the field, spins out of the pocket, makes crazy plays, but the guy can't see the middle of the field, won't throw the middle of the field, really isolates himself outside the numbers as to where he's willing to look and throw. There's just a game plan for Russell that you can't call or execute because he's going to ruin it for you. Even if they win and he looks great, not what the offensive coordinator called, not what he intended, right? That's kind of where I see Fields. So I went through the all 22 of Monday's game, got to see the whole thing, every drop back. There, and every Bears fan is saying, call a vertical game, call a vertical, blah, 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 blah. Okay, watch the tape, Bears fans. I can't tell you how many three and two high looks the Vikes came with that whole game, and they're calling vertical stuff. And a lot of it actually did come open for Fields. He ain't pulling the trigger. And they're calling it. So now you got a defensive coordinator that's saying, all right, we know what he is and what his only strength is, according to their fans too. Let's just stop that. And it does stop that. So now you got Getsy who's like, well, what can I do? I could call the best game plan of all time. I can cater it to this kid. If I don't cater it to him, he'll ruin it. If I do cater it to him, the DC knows what we're doing. So at what point do you just say, all right, well, it's the quarterback? Because the offensive coordinators get so much flack, and sometimes it is the OCs. You watch Ken Dorsey's offense with Josh Allen, and it was disjointed and confusing. And it was like, it was like he didn't know what his personnel was. He was calling vertical stuff for Gabe consistently. Trent Sherfield's running behind cornerbacks on like his leverage is off. Like there's so many things wrong with it. Spacing's off, timing's off. But at what point, it's a hard thing to find that balance of blame. But at what point, as an offensive coordinator, do you just say like, screw it, I'm done, and I'm blameless? Like I'm not going to take the blame for this anymore. I just don't understand how, when we watch offenses, it's still like this barbaric approach of like, this guy sucks, this guy sucks, this guy sucks. There's a lot of layers to it, and I'm sure Jarvis, you being the deep thinker you are, you might have some better thoughts on it than I do. John, same. But I just can't figure out where, you draw that line to point the finger and who's at fault when, it's like you're going to your job and you're doing your whole thing right, and you pass the sandwich on to the next guy at Subway after you put all the toppings on, and he just smashes the shit out of it. Okay, well, I did my part, dude, and now you sabotaged it, and the guy, the customer gets his order, and it's a crappy sandwich. Well, I did my part. I did it. And I feel like that's a lot of these play callers, and then, the quarterbacks are getting them fired or making them look bad. But I'm like, I don't know what else they can do.
My question, I think, here would be, are we focusing on assigning blame, or are we focusing on what generates the optimal outcome, if that makes sense?
I'd say both. Obviously, like for some teams, you're like, we need to find the blame. Like, we need to figure out what's going on. Like, what's wrong? Because at some point, like in Fields' case or Zach Wilson's case, they suck. They, like, even when it's optimal for them, you're like, all right, they're not, like, it's not going to happen. It's not being executed. I don't know what else they could do. So you got to assign blame, I guess, in my opinion. That way you can, because sometimes I think the optimal outcome is like, we got to get rid of one of these guys. And sometimes it's not. And I think that's what I'm asking is like, where do we find that line?
I think the question that comes to my mind is this, right? Is, can you change the quarterback? Like, is Justin Fields going to change? Like his game, like, is he going to physically change or anything? Like, or is he what he is?
I mean, I think that's the thing. He's in year 3, and like so many of his tendencies remain the same. And I went through that entire Vikings game, and I'm like, if for him, I found so many things that like, even if he would do something right, escape pressure and blah, 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 I'd roll out of it. And you're like, okay, there was no one open. Then he throws a pass to Mooney and sails it way over his head. And you're like, dude, you did the hard part. The pass was open. Then there's other times where they'll call deep shots and they're wide open. Guess who's not pulling the trigger? Guess who has no pressure in his face? Fields. And it just feels like his problems compounded. If it's not one thing, it's another thing. And then he makes this boneheaded play and it turns into this thing. And then the defensive coordinator sees this tendency. And now it's like, I wouldn't even know what to do as the offensive coordinator, or like what my next step would be, because I feel like, they have this game plan in mind. They have this thought in mind of what the script is going to look like and how they want to execute and beat a defense. But if your quarterback refuses to do any of it, where do you go from there?
Gotcha. I want to make sure I have my notes here. John, if you have something you want to throw in here, but I have something to add to this specifically.
So to me, one of the problems that the NFL had for a long time was coaches not being able to cater their schemes to the players.
Right.
That's why, Terrell Pryor didn't work in the NFL. If he comes in out of college, 10 years later, 5 years later, he probably has a very different NFL career.
Yeah.
We didn't know what to do with that type of a quarterback. And I mean, Michael Vick was well ahead of his time. And how many championships did he win? None. He got to an NFC championship game 1 year with Atlanta. And so I think to some extent, coaching has been the issue for a long time. So what people are starting to figure out is that if you want to be successful at what you do, you have to be able to evolve with the game. Look at college, for example. Nick Saban is the best at what he does in college football because he's constantly changed and evolved what Alabama football means while still staying true to the dominance and the physicality that they play with. Right. You know, it went from we got Mark Ingram, we got Derrick Henry, we're going to run the ball up the gut, we're going to run all these power formations, we're stronger than you, you can't stop us, to 2 years later, they're a completely 4-receiver spread vertical attack. Yeah. And it's because and that's why, you know, great coaches are great, because they can cater a scheme to the player. And so in the case of Fields, you got a guy that's got a great arm, you got a guy that's an excellent athlete, and you want to get him outside the pocket and get him the ball down the field, right? That's kind of the idea, is to put as much stress on the defense as possible. Now, you're talking about him, schemes being wide open and he's not pulling the trigger. And that goes back to the whole, I'm going to bring up the point from earlier in the year when Justin goes in that press conference and just shits on his coaches and is like, oh, well, you know, I'm robotic because they're trying to tell me too much. I mean, like, come on, dude. It's because we have this scheme and we want you to be able to read it the right way. So it's at some point, I think you get to a point where you're like, okay, the quarterback can't do. We tried different schemes, we tried different things. He's not processing it well enough. We got to move on, you know. But again, it comes back to, are the Bears running, you know, stuff that fits Fields, or are they running the same generic shit the rest of the league is running because they're scared they're going to lose their job and they want to kind of say, hey, well, we're trying what everybody else is and it's not working, you know? Yeah. You look at a guy Mike McDaniels, you look at Nick Sirianni, you look at those types of coaches right now that are thriving. Andy Reid's done it forever. Andy's offense has changed since he's been around drastically. And you know, it kind of comes down to you got to be able to fit your personnel the right way. I feel like the Bears are running a lot of the same stuff that everybody else is in the league, and they're trying to do that. So it's kind of like, well, they save their jobs, we move on from Justin Fields, instead of trying to go out there and figure out, is there some way that we can do it? You know, like I started coaching kickers, right? So this is not quite the same as scheming up an offense, but what I'm doing, I got two freshmen. Their one's range is probably about 35 right now. The other's 30 on a good day. And so right now, as we're building up their strength, it's kind of a, hey, let's go out there and let's just try some different shit. Let's just see what works. You know, hey, I want you to try your swing this way. I want you to hold your arm this way when you go through the kick. We're trying everything in practice, you know, and just, I'm kind of seeing this. Hey, we need to get wider through the swing, blah, 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 blah. We're going to be able to do a kickers episode now, Justin, by the way.
I'm sick that week.
And so, but no, that's the thing, is it's like everybody's different. Every kicker's different. So I need to come out here. I need to figure out what works for them. I need them to figure out what works for them. Yeah. So maybe the case of Justin right now is he doesn't know who he is as a player. He's not comfortable with the identity he has as a player, and that's what the coaches are missing on, because that's not something you're going to spend a lot of time trying to figure out when you're a pro.
Right. And I think, well, we've talked about him before, but I think also if you don't know, as a first-round pick, you don't know your identity as a quarterback, that's a problem. Now it's year 3, and we don't know if he's this amazing rusher or if he's a big arm vertical guy or if he's a screen thrower against the, you know, like at what point are you like, all right, we're done with this kid? Like, there's no way.
But we also don't know what's going on inside the building. And the reason I bring this up is because look at what Mike McDaniel did with Tua when he took over as the head coach. Tua thought he was a terrible quarterback. He couldn't play in the NFL. His confidence was absolutely shot. And Mike comes in there and puts together a video of 300 plays that he hit and put in the NFL and ran perfectly and made a good play on. And he said, no, look, you can play in the NFL. And so what Mike did after that was in showing him and sitting there breaking down hours of tape with his quarterback, is he builds up the confidence, but also at the same time shows him, hey, this is who you are. This is what's working. This is what we're going to do. You know, and so what are the Bears doing with Justin behind the scenes that we don't know about? Are there conversations that are being had like that where you're sitting there going, Justin, like we need you to figure out who you are as not just as a player but as a person. Like, what is your temperament? Who are you? Who is Justin Fields?
Yeah.
I think that if that's something that's missing, that might explain why he's not picking up on different things.
Right. Jarvis, what do you got?
Dude, I got a lot here to go through. So did you ever, I don't know if either of you have read the article I have is my pen tweet. It's basically a college thesis. If you thought the little one I made for the Jayden Daniels one was bad, you should see this one. But it was essentially about how you can compare evolutionary processes to the functionality of like selecting players and then seeing whether they succeed or fail and so on and so forth. And one of the key ideas that I got out of that is this idea of, it's the whole, you've heard of survival of the fittest, right? And so what does that mean? Does it mean survival of the fastest, the most explosive, the longest toothed animal? Not necessarily. It's more so just the survival of whatever is most adapted to the environment, right? Yeah. Like you could think of like, let's say a cheetah. Let's say you made a cheetah 10 times faster, right? You let a cheetah run 700 miles per hour. What's going to happen? The second it tries to make the slightest turn, it's breaking its leg. So it's useless. Even you can make it as fast as you want, and at a certain point, it stops being optimal. And so when I think of that, I think of what makes anything useful in a given environment, right? So highlighted a paragraph from that. A key point here is to understand that these traits and characteristics do not significantly change for individuals when thrust into different environments, but they instead find success or failure based on what environment they land in. An animal cannot force its teeth to grow longer or sharper, nor can a man stretch hard enough to grow several inches. If you run with 4.8 speed, you likely cannot run with 4.3 speed, no matter what training regimen you have. It's just not part of your type, right? So I think of Fields and I think of, okay, if we were trying to figure out what would make Fields fail or succeed, right? Is it, can we make this environment as absolutely optimal within the scheme to allow him to succeed? And then if we do that, is he still failing, right? Like think of Lamar Jackson. Lamar Jackson, if you put him on a scheme any other than what Baltimore did for him, how would it go? He would have had a different path probably as a player. But let's say you put him in Baltimore and he still fails anyways. What does that tell you? It tells you that you just can't succeed with that, right? You've done everything possible to optimize for a given environment and you've still failed. Okay. So with Fields, it's like if you have an offensive coordinator who is refusing to optimize for that environment, then you can't really know truly what Fields was capable of or what he wasn't capable of. Right. Now, if you optimize for that environment, he still fails, then okay, he just doesn't have the physical tools. But I think judging whether or not something can be successful, you have to give it every chance to adapt and put it in the optimal environment that you can, and then that's how you judge. And so if it were up to me, I would say I would place blame at the offensive coordinator's feet if they're refusing to do everything they possibly can to give Fields the best offense he can run. Right. And the reason being that there's going to be a time frame of, okay, let's say you have a year with Fields. Let's say you have 2 years, whatever. Can you get another quarterback? Are you gonna go sign some guy? Maybe another guy fits what you want to run better. But what's the price of going and getting him? So as long as you have Fields, you need to do everything you possibly can to maximize those tools. And if you still fail, then it's not on you. But if you're not doing that, then you're not optimizing the environment. You're giving him, go back to survival of the fittest. Fittest is determined by ability just to thrive within a given environment. You're not giving him that environment.
Right.
And for the Bears to get a guy that fit their scheme, the cost was an undrafted free agent. So that worked out well for them. Sorry, couldn't help myself on that one.
I knew Tyson Badgett was going to work his way into this conversation.
Bajent, come on, man, get it right.
Badgett.
Just
I
like
butchered
agent.
it too. Yeah.
What's that?
I messed it up too.
Yeah, I don't care what we're Badgett, Bajent. It's all the same crap. Anyways,
I couldn't help myself. That was just waiting. I was like right there, grab it.
I was waiting. I was like, John's gonna bring it up. Here we go.
Mm-hmm. And here's an interesting question too. I would give you, Gam, is like again going back to whether or not this is going to use evolutionary terms, so it might sound kind of weird, but like an organism surviving or dying, right? It's based on, like I said, that ability to adapt to a given environment. Well, like you mentioned with an offensive coordinator, what got you to the show? And can you change from that? So it's not just on the quarterback of how adaptable are they and fitting an environment for them. It's also an offensive coordinator, and how adaptable can an offensive coordinator be? One of the things I mentioned in the article is this idea of, let's say you outlawed running, what would happen, right? Like you cannot run. What happens to the running backs in the league? There are some running backs that would continue to thrive, like Christian McCaffrey would still be around. You could find ways to use him, but would Derrick Henry? And so you could kind of pose that question of, if you brought in an offensive coordinator, right, and all he can do is the one thing. Let's say you bring an offensive coordinator, all he knows is all about the running game, right? And you put him in that league, he dies. But you put another one that has the adaptability to change and go to something new, okay, he lives. And so I think in general, having an offensive coordinator who has just like that one trick, or is limited as far as their ability to adjust, just hurts your ability to get the most fit team that you can possibly get.
Okay. I like that.
Because I think we've seen certain coordinators come in the league and exceed expectations by far, because we look at that personnel from a talent standpoint and we go, yeah, this is going to be one of the worst teams in the league, and they come out and they're competitive. And that's when the credit goes to the coordinator, because we know what all these guys are capable of doing, at least from a pure talent standpoint. And so when you can come up with creative ways to make things happen as a coordinator, as someone putting together an offense or defense or a special teams unit, got to throw that in there now. That's what really makes you stand out among your peers, because it's about being able to place players into the right position for them to succeed. That's what makes a great coach.
Yeah.
And without that ability, you don't make it very long. There's certain guys we've seen come up and they made their career off of a player that carried them. Josh McDaniel, Tom Brady. I think that you could make the argument with, what was it, Adam Gase, Peyton Manning. Everybody knew that Brady and Manning were the real architects of what was happening, because they were so far advanced in the game and their knowledge and everything else that they were basically the offensive coordinator. They were dictating what they wanted to do, what they liked to do. And that's where you see what your job has to become. If the quarterback knows what he wants to do and he knows what he likes to do, that's what you have to build it to. That's what you have to build your offense to. And so those specific opportunities worked perfectly and ended up in being Super Bowls for those teams.
Yeah.
Because the quarterback knew who he was and knew where he needed to be successful. And so there's a lot of guys that come in that they don't know that. They don't know themselves that well. They don't understand it that well. And so, and because we talk about guys like Brady, we talk about guys like Manning, we talk about Montana, we talk about, these all-time greats that were all so far ahead in the game that they were able to do these things and set their coordinators up for success, because they're like, yeah, I like this, I like that, I like this, I don't like this, don't like doing that. And so that's where being a coach, you have to be an evaluator to some aspect too, where you're saying, this is what he likes, this is what he's going to do well with, this is what he's going to do well with, and do that accurately. That's hard to do.
Yeah.
That's the other thing too, is you got guys coming in the league at 21, 22 years old, right? I think sometimes even 20. Think about you guys when you guys were that young. Did you guys have yourselves figured out?
Stupid.
Yeah. What makes you think that these guys, these young men coming out, have any idea who they are?
Right. And sometimes, you don't figure it out till 27, 28. And then, but by that time, these guys have busted and they're, like I think about Zach Wilson being a young prospect and being kind of, I don't want to say immature, but it just felt like we talked about this before, when you look at him and Trevor Lawrence, even in my pre-draft stuff, I was like, Trevor Lawrence is a man. Like, this guy carries himself like a man. He's an adult. He's a grown up. There's just a difference in his vibe and what he is as a human versus the uber talented Zach Wilson. It just feels like we're dealing with someone who knows who they are and a guy that's still kind of learning about life and what he wants to be, who he wants to be, or just like the way he carries himself is different. I don't want to, make him seem like he was an idiot or discredit him for being what he was, but it was just an opinion. It was, and I could be wrong or right, but that was my opinion. Is there's a difference. And I sold out and went with Zach Wilson and said, I'm going to take the talented kid. I think he's the best quarterback in this class. Wrong. And we still see it today. One of the most talented passers we've seen with the arm strength, the arm talent, everything he does is fantastic. But when you ask him to plug those tools into an NFL offense and use his mind and guide his physical tools, awful. Just been terrible. And I don't think it's getting better. And I'm like, I don't think any offensive coordinator could fix that. And I think he's beneath the threshold of like, all right, he's so bad, it doesn't matter now. So I don't care who his offensive coordinator is. I got to blame Zach. And I'm getting that place with Fields. It's like, all right, I just don't know what you would do to this kid. Like anything you ask him to do, it's like there's a problem. And maybe it's because unlike Tua and some of these other guys, yeah, they might not be physically gifted, but I think they have some elite trait or some ability to do certain things at a very high level. And you can build around that. But when a guy is below average at pretty much everything, now what's the offensive coordinator's job? Try and figure out what he's not the worst at. And that might be harsh, but that's my headspace. Is I'm like, I can't watch all these bad quarterbacks week to week and think like, someone could be doing better with them. Like, nah, at a certain point, it's just they're bad. I coach hockey kids too, and sometimes I'm like, he's not good. He's not going anywhere. He's just bad. The moms will be like, what can I do to get him, to be this player next year and make this team? And I'm like,
find a new sport.
Yeah, like what point do you just like, hey, your kid kind of isn't good. He's not good. And I think because all these guys made it to the NFL, we give them enough credit. Like, well, they've got to be good. Someone will make them good. Like, no, maybe not. Maybe not. Maybe they're just busts. We see that a lot, and that's just the reality of it. So
here's a question I would pose is, and you think of Zach Wilson as a guy who he's not necessarily like he's below that threshold, right? There's a threshold of ability to where, okay, you just can't, there's no environment I can put you in to make you succeed. I can give you all these receivers. I can give you the best offensive line. At a certain point, you just cannot physically do these things. Right. And so I kind of wonder with Wilson, or not Wilson, with Fields, it's like, has he had the opportunity to try all these different like ways to attack the field? Or are they being creative? Because if it's just, we're just going to build this offense as this is what we want our quarterback to be able to do, rather than this is what he can do, you're kind of taking away that opportunity. I don't think it's necessarily should be on Fields to like elevate a scheme that isn't suitable for him, right? Like he can try, but I think trying to construct the perfect environment for him is all you can do. At that point, you've kind of, if he's not that, then you give up on it. I'll ask this, and it's kind of two questions here. One would be, you said that they kind of, I think John said this, that they are building this offense in a way where it's more of like fit for other quarterbacks in the league rather than specifically for Fields. And so I wonder if you were to take all these other quarterbacks and put them in this offense, how would they do? And not necessarily just from a talent standpoint, but just from a fit standpoint. If you like, are there 20 quarterbacks that this offense is built better for than for Fields? And if so, what does that say about the offensive coordinator?
So what I would say, watching all their film last year and every game so far this year, is like the offensive coordinator is not adapting to Fields well. But what I would say is they've tried. Like last year, we saw Fields have all those huge rushing games, but then Fields complained like, I'm tired, and then he gets hurt. And they're like, okay, great. So then you see certain games where they're like, let's, take things vertical. Let's get you DJ Moore. Let's give you tons of hitters on the outside the numbers where you literally don't have to read anything. Just look at the corner. If he's a certain look, you throw this. If not, it's let's dumb it down as much as possible. Okay, well, that only works for so long. Let's play Brian Flores defense, and we're going to throw 19 screens and play quick game and see if we can get you out like that and make you not process anything. Okay, well, at a certain point, it almost feels like Fields is turning these like the play caller and the coach into what he is. Now they're just like, we don't know our identity. Every single week I study a Bears game, I'm like, this is not even the same offense as last week and a different offense than the week before. And maybe that's on the offensive coordinators as well. I think it's just become this mess of like two inferior talents or people that are kind of bad at their jobs right now are trying to make each other work. And it's hit that point where it's just not going to work anymore. I think Fields is not great, but I think the play callers and stuff are kind of working around it, and they're not doing a great job either. And they kind of hit this snag where it's like, well, what else can we try? Because we've tried so many different things.
You said each week it seems like a different offense. That's a good thing. That's a good sign, right? Because you're trying to give him all these, like, again, you think about it, the fitting into the environment. You're giving him a new environment every week to try. And you're going through each one, and each one he's failing. And so what that tells me is, okay, then he's not the right guy. Now you still got to give him the best one to where you can succeed, But if you've given him all of these and you're kind of at that point, like, we don't know what to do with him, we're kind of out of ideas. I think you just put him in the best one you possibly can to win in, and then you just say, okay, this is what we are. Because at that point, he's below the threshold. He's in the same boat like you think Wilson is. And so obviously at that point you reach a level where it's okay, the price is we have to wait for a year or two, however long it is, to get a new quarterback in here, and hopefully we all keep our jobs long enough to do that. But this is something you could think of it from the evolutionary standpoint, but I think also in machine learning, the approach is to basically just keep throwing variations at the wall to see what works, right?
Okay.
You think of, like, let's say a cheetah has let's say a litter of 8, and 6 of them die for whatever various reasons. The 2 that survive, okay, cool, they fit that environment, and then you extend from there and you keep trying those variations until it fits the environment. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
And so the same thing goes for, like, you're trying things with Fields. You're just trying new variations, and some are going to die. 1 week it's going to die, and you're going to be like, oh, crap, we can't do that again. Let's go to something new. And maybe there's just not a point where you can hit that where you're going to find success, where you're just below that line. But all you can do is keep trying new things until hopefully you get somewhere, or you get a new quarterback in, and then hopefully you can do something good with them.
Right, and then hopefully it works out that way.
Yeah. Sometimes the cheetah just isn't fast enough. Sometimes the litter of 8 all dies, and then you just don't have any more cheetahs. Like, and at that point, it's like, okay, we did everything we could. We've had as much variation in the system as possible. But that's all you can do. There's a quote real quick I want to pull up. John, if you want to fill for a second, if you have any thoughts, or Cam, if you have thoughts, so I can hunt that quote down.
No, it's all good. Overall, to me, I wouldn't want the headache. Right, Fields. So if I'm running a team, Fields is probably not my first option. I love the arm strength. I love the athletic ability, but beyond that, what is it? What is he bringing to my team? I'm not even sure of that yet. And that's a good point that you bring up about the rushing and bringing in all the different points. I'm glad they're doing. I haven't watched a lot of Bears this year. I can't even say I've even watched the Monday night game. I had it on and just kind of like lost interest. I think I ended up watching Ted Lasso instead on my phone while the game's on. Just like Ted Lasso's amazing. But he got his mustache too, Justin.
I know.
I know where you got your inspiration now. I get it. I understand. But no, so go ahead, Mark.
So the quote is, selection can only act on what variation is already in the population. It cannot create variation. So variation you would think of, let's say, as any quarterback, like Fields versus Bajent, right?
Yeah.
It's the same thing. So they can only do what is available in their quarterback room. They can only work with what is in their quarterback room. And so they have to optimize that in whatever way is possible. But at a certain point, if there is just simply not variation in the population to where it could be successful, to where it can, be fruitful, then you just can't do anything at that point. You're kind of just like, okay, let's go for what is the best possible option. And then it failed.
Right.
Get a new one. Try to find it, something new to come into it. But
so how much do you think the Bears right now are kind of like, well, maybe this Mitch Trubisky guy wasn't that bad?
I mean, yikes! I remember those Trubisky days. They were, at least Fields gives you like flashes of like, oh, he's gonna run, or like, oh, he threw it 65 yards. Where Trubisky, every play, you're just like, is he crapping his pants back there? And like,
hey, but they went to the playoffs. Remember? They went to the playoffs.
It just felt so underwhelming watching him, even if like they were winning. You're just like, this. I didn't like that.
Well, it was underwhelming Monday night.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. I know. That's why I'm like, I don't like both. I don't like either. So
Here's what I threw out, right? Like, how many years into Trubisky did Bears fans kind of just give up and quit and say, we've had enough? We're tired of this guy.
They're quick.
It was like during the playoff run.
They're still hanging on to Fields, right? It's the entertainment business. Fields is more entertaining than Trubisky. Now, if you're going pure by like, who's going to give you more wins, who's more valuable necessarily, like maybe you would have a different argument. You could say Trubisky. But as far as like actual who's entertaining for the fans, who's going to sell tickets, oh yeah, Fields.
Yeah.
That's exactly it. Well, gentlemen, riveting conversation. I think that went really well. And we got to go ahead and wrap up the sick pod.
I do have, we'll do it next week. I do have trivia for you guys next week. So So stay here, John. Stay here, Mark. Come back.
I might skip trivia week. That's my kicker's week, man.
It'll be cool. It has a purpose, and it'll be fun. So, but we ran out of time tonight. Next week for sure. I'll pop.
So again, thank you all for tuning in. For Justin Gamble, for Mark Jarvis, I'm John Vogel, and we will be back at it right here on the Sick Pod next week. Shane, let's get out of here.
And that's a wrap. Hope you don't miss us too much until next time. Follow the Sick Podcast with Draft Vogel on YouTube, Instagram, Facebook, Google Play, and Apple Podcasts.